If you've clicked on this video, chances are you've had either sleep paralysis or out-of-body experiences. So I'm going to only briefly discuss what each of those are, and then we'll jump right into the tips on how to mitigate negative experiences. So you can think of sleep paralysis as being stuck in the body. It can happen either before or after sleep, or sometime in the middle of the night. When you wake up, you can't move, you can't speak. You might see your immediate environment, and there might be some sort of intruder in the room with you that you see or hear or feel. The out-of-body experience is kind of the opposite in a way. You're unstuck from your physical body, and you also tend to be in your immediate environment, although not always, and there can also be supernatural content in the room with you or outside of the room if you go somewhere else. So I found that there can be positive and negative experiences with both, but what tends to make the experience negative is a lack of control of one's own body or the environment around them. So kind of an invasion of personal space. And in the media, as in some religious spheres, there's been a lot of demonizing and sensationalizing of these experiences. And even in the medical community, it's often seen as pathological or associated with substance abuse. But on the other hand, with New Age spirituality, you kind of get this sugarcoating of these experiences, especially astral projection or the deliberate OBE. If you have any negative experiences, it's often seen as, the experiencer themselves is to blame because they have low vibrations or they're somehow unevolved spiritually. But in my own anthropological research, I've found that there's a lot more diversity in terms of both the causes and the solutions for unwanted experiences. They're often environmental or lifestyle in nature, sometimes medical as well. So that is a good thing. It means that there are things that we can do to prevent these negative experiences. So sleep paralysis, normally there's three different features involved. One is the intruder, and it's normally seen as threatening, although sometimes there can be a deceased loved one or a protector or helper there that can be quite positive. But generally it is a threatening, shadow person, a human, an animal, an insect, or something from folklore or supernatural stories. It can also be an alien, and it's either seen, heard, or felt. It can also be smelled in some rare cases. And there can also be the sense of pressure on your chest or difficulty breathing. That can actually be a clue as to what caused it. It could be that you're sleeping on your back, so breathing will be naturally harder in that case. Or it could be sleep apnea or another sleep disorder that makes it difficult to breathe while you're asleep. And third is vestibular hallucinations, such as floating. Sleep paralysis can lead on to an OBE, and I'll give you some techniques for how to do that deliberately. Sleep paralysis, for most people, especially if it's frequent, can be quite terrifying. Even the floating or the going out of body part can be sometimes. For example, one person on Reddit said, I don't know who they are, but they kept taking me out of my body by pulling my hair. I'm so terrified, I can't stop crying. I've had this now since I was 13. I'm almost 35 now, and it's constant. It's ruining my life. So this is really disturbing, but there are three main ways of handling it. One is to manage it, and you can do this through emotional regulation. The hallucinations tend to respond to how you're feeling. So if you feel really afraid of it, then chances are it's going to become even more frightening. Sometimes this isn't always the case, and this kind of goes back to blaming the experiencer. It's not always all on you. So, for example, one person told me that she wasn't afraid at all, like it was already daytime. The sun was coming in through the window, it was quite beautiful, she felt very peaceful, and then this kind of black mist came through the heater and then sort of settled onto the chair and turned into a humanoid figure and attacked her. And so she wasn't afraid of it up until the point where it tried to grab her, at which point, luckily, she immediately woke up. And it can be really difficult anyway to talk yourself out of being afraid, because a lot of times it's dark and you can't move. So your mind naturally tries to create something that explains what is happening. It's sort of similar to a sentinel dream. For example, you could dream that you're choking or drowning and then later find out that you actually do have sleep apnea, or otherwise you have some sort of trouble breathing in your sleep. But you can learn to control your emotions in sleep paralysis. That can change the content. So sleep paralysis is really common among South Korean students because of their crazy study schedules. And I found a lot of tips online that they share amongst each other of what to do when you get sleep paralysis. And some people said that say if they hear something scary, a scary voice, they just try to imagine their favorite singer singing their favorite song, and that scary voice actually transforms into their favorite singer's voice. Or another person saw a scary intruder and they were thinking about their favorite cartoon character, and it did actually morph into their favorite cartoon character. So similar to lucid dreams, if you have a lucid nightmare, you can use your mind to change the environment around you. It doesn't always work though. Again, one student wanted to see a ghost for some reason and tried to imagine seeing it, but nothing happened, and he was complaining to other students about this. Another thing is that just in your daily waking life, it can be really difficult and lonely to be a sleep paralysis sufferer, especially when it's frequent and distressing. The experience is quite heavily stigmatized, especially because of the intruder, so it can sound like you're crazy, to your doctor or others. I'm seeing, shadow people in the middle of the night in my room. And people probably won't understand unless they've experienced it themselves. So there are really helpful online communities like Reddit or Facebook, especially Reddit because it's so anonymous. And people are really empowering and really supportive on there with tips. They can share, funny memes that can anything that makes it more lighthearted can actually be helpful and can make the experience itself less frightening. But I learned that it's not good practice to share your scary experiences in detail, because there's something like the placebo effect or the power of suggestion in sleep paralysis, as well as lucid dreams and OBEs. It's called the nocebo effect, which is a negative side of the placebo effect. So if you share something scary, sometimes it can happen to someone else. And this happened with the documentary The Nightmare. So a lot of people that saw The Nightmare, which is on sleep paralysis, got sleep paralysis for the first time after watching it. So sharing memes, encouraging each other, and tips on managing sleep paralysis can really help. So let's look at some tips of how to prevent and then escape sleep paralysis happening. So the kind of most obvious thing is don't sleep on your back, because sleep paralysis often happens when you're sleeping on your back. And one of the things that can prevent this is to sew a tennis ball or something in the back of your pajamas, or to maybe keep pillows on your side or something so that you won't lie on your back. And also make sure that you're not exhausted, like if you go to the gym at night, maybe you want to change your gym schedule so that it's earlier in the day. And so you've kind of got to work out what's causing your sleep paralysis. It's different for everyone, and the process of finding it out is a bit like a detective story. So it could be caffeine, for example. It could be diabetes as well. So one of the things that people want to do is to stay up as late as they can, which it actually will have the opposite effect, because sleep disruption, including sleep deprivation, can actually cause sleep paralysis. So you want to make sure that you go to sleep around the same time every day and wake up around the same morning every day if possible, and spend about an hour before bed winding down. Make it cozy atmosphere, have low warm lighting. Sometimes you might even want to brush your teeth and shower in candlelight just to kind of wind down slowly, and or read like a nice fiction or something like that, something lighthearted, just to make sleep, a good experience. Also, sometimes you might find that you have an episode in one place but not another. So you might want to try changing your sleep environment even for one night if possible. Sometimes it could be due to dust or other allergens or something else in the environment that makes you feel stressed, anxious, or unsafe. And sometimes a lot of people say that having a pet in the room helps, because pets seem to somehow recognize when you're having sleep paralysis and wake you up. And some human partners also can do that. So this is also a palate cleanser after the last image of the sleep paralysis demon. So sometimes none of these tips are going to work for you, and especially if it's frequent, you might want to go to your doctor and check if there's some sort of medical or sleep disorder. There's also, while you're waiting for an appointment, the London Sleep Centre has this really useful online assessment, and it'll send you an email after to tell you, like, you might have sleep apnea or whatever. So, of course, don't just listen to the internet. It's just so that you have something to talk to your doctor about and get tested. A lot of doctors have never heard of sleep paralysis, so GPs will not actually, it's not part of their training. So if you're afraid the doctor won't take you seriously, you might want to print out information on sleep paralysis from WebMD or the NHS website or something and bring it with you. So say you can't prevent sleep paralysis, but once you're in the episode itself, how can you escape the episode as quickly as possible? The most common tip is to try and wiggle your pinky finger, even just like little micro movements. You can also try moving your tongue, which is a less known tip. And then Jalal Beland at the University of Cambridge, who has done extensive research on sleep paralysis, developed this 4-step therapy. So I'll read it out to you. So to escape sleep paralysis, first, remind yourself that this is a common and temporary experience. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you, either mentally or physically. It doesn't necessarily mean that. Second, distance your emotions from what is happening around you. Remind yourself that there's nothing to fear, and that fear can actually make it worse. So you want to try and calm yourself down. Third, turn your attention from what's happening around you inward instead by meditating on something that evokes strong positive emotions. So it could be a song, a hymn, a prayer, thinking of a happy memory, anything that lifts your spirit. And then fourth, relax your muscles. So they actually advise not to try to move, and also not to try to control your breathing. So that's interesting because that'll come up a little bit later. After your episode ends, also try to stay awake for about 30 minutes or so, and maybe give your dog or cat a treat if they're the ones that woke you up, and do something that's comforting and cozy, because sometimes if you go back to sleep immediately, you might go back into sleep paralysis. Before we get into OBEs, I want to recommend these 4 books. 40 Winks by Brenda Moore. She's actually a sleep technician with narcolepsy, which can often cause both OBEs and sleep paralysis, and it's a really fascinating book. Then you have David J. Hufford and Shelley Adler, who are both medical anthropologists, and they go into a lot of the experiences of people in different cultures and some of the science and history behind it. And then Ryan Hurd, he's a lecturer in psychology, and he is also an expert in lucid dreaming. And his book is just like a really good overall sort of book on sleep paralysis, how to get out of it, the history, the features, and so on. So you can actually escape sleep paralysis into an OBE directly, and you can do this by either thinking of something good, thinking of something like lighthearted again, something that makes you feel light and floaty. So it's interesting that things that make you feel light emotionally can lead to feeling like you're actually floating out of your body. You can also launch into a lucid dream, and I found that sometimes some techniques can lead to different experiences for different people. But there's certain techniques that can lead to an OBE specifically, especially if it has something to do with perspective switching, like imagining a dot in front of your head and then a little bit further and a little bit further, and intermittently telling yourself that your awareness is in your body. So this kind of confuses your perception. And another thing that helps with OBEs is sort of embodiment practices. So for example, anything like imagining energy moving through your body, anything with a focus on the body, basically. With OBEs, they tend to be a lot more positive than sleep paralysis, although there can also be negative experiences, especially in the beginning of the experience. So like sleep paralysis, you're generally in your immediate environment, but you can walk or float out of your body. Sometimes you can feel pulled as if by an external force. And you can find yourself so in the immediate environment, but also remote locations, especially once you go out the window or a door or a wall. And there can also be difficulty navigating the OBE. So it's not always like the movies depict, where you can think of a place and you can just go there, you know, like a superhero or something. It's sort of like baby steps. You have to learn how to navigate in this new state of consciousness. So just as sleep paralysis can be caused by anything that disrupts the sleep cycle, OBEs can be caused by anything that disrupts the sort of integration of sensory or vestibular or perceptual perspective taking information, which happens in the temporoparietal junction. So that processes it, and then it will kind of create your external reality and, you know, present to you the environment, basically. So the out-of-body experience itself is thought by psychologists to be a copy, a backup copy of the environment based on your spatial memory. And so if there's anything that's disrupting the integration of information to present the reality to you, your mind will switch into this backup copy, the OBE environment, basically. And so these experiences are often seen as very blissful or awe-inducing and spiritual as well, and they can have a huge effect on people's belief. So in terms of the difficulty navigating, some OBEs can feel very heavy. It can feel difficult to move even from one part of the room to the other. It can also be difficult to see around you. It can be very dark. So some of the things that help with this is to try to move further away from your body, or to go into another room, even if it takes time. And another thing which can really help with clearing up the space and seeing better is to stay put and rub your hands together, or try like some kind of grounding techniques, touching the ground. That especially works if you find yourself in a remote environment. So there is no body that you can move further away from. So then switch to a grounding technique. So one of the things that people say is the hardest thing to deal with in OBEs, particularly in the beginning, is to deal with entities. You might see something or someone in the room with you, just like with sleep paralysis. So you can try to escape the experience to deal with this, which, like sleep paralysis, you can just think of something really lighthearted and joyful, and then you might be able to float up and out through the wall or the window, or wake yourself up. You can wake yourself up also with strong emotions, through surprise or just through like panicking. And another thing is to embrace the OBE, but I feel like this is really controversial. Because in Western New Age circles, there's the belief that we attract positive or negative entities with our vibration or our frequency. I found this not to be the case always. So sometimes things will happen in certain environments, rooms or buildings, or when they're around certain people. Or it could happen during an illness, for example. And recently someone recommended that if you see a frightening OBE, you should embrace it as part of yourself. But the thing is that most people who report OBEs report feeling and knowing that any entity is not part of themselves. And I also spoke to a biologist who researches OBEs recently, and she said that they interview a lot of people that have both lucid dreams and OBEs, and they found lucid dreamers and in sleep paralysis, you can affect the entity's behavior just with your own emotions and your mind. But that doesn't tend to happen with an OBE. So, but, you know, luckily you might not be able to affect their behavior, but you have the power to move out of the environment through escaping the experience. And you can also try to send it love. I've heard that, but it depends on the situation and how you feel. You want to do what feels comfortable to you. If this entity is moving towards you, you might not have the wherewithal to try to send it love. I mean, it just depends on the situation. And I think that whether these entities are real external beings or they're a part of the psyche, there could be some psychological consequences for embracing them. It might not be a good response to learn when confronted with fear, to actually embrace what is fearful. Because think about if you learn this response and then you automatically have this response in waking when there is actual danger. Like there's not enough known about how responses in OBEs can affect responses when you're awake. In lucid dreams, they find like training, muscle memory, and that kind of thing in the lucid dream can actually have an effect on waking performance. So I'm a little bit skeptical about this, but again, do what feels right for you. But if the fear is rational, or if your gut feeling is telling you to flee or to fight or something, do that. And somebody else said to me that especially as women, we're often not socialized to have strong boundaries. And allowing a frightening figure to get close to you in this very realistic OBE can actually be traumatizing or re-traumatizing for certain people. So I also met a shaman recently in Siberia who shared that, so this is in her lucid dream, it's a little bit different, but she was met with a spider who she felt that it was a part of herself, but it was a bad part of herself, one that she didn't want to embrace. And it was asking her, do you want me? Do you want to like embrace me? Do you want to accept me? And she said no, and she fought it off with her staff. And she told me that it was her way of asserting that she was choosing to be a good shaman. She was choosing not to work with dark energies or dark spirits. So this is just, you know, an alternative way of seeing this, because I know that in English-speaking resources, a lot of the information out there is more kind of new age and embraces this sort of, you know, this kind of narrative that everything is a part of yourself, which most cultures actually don't believe. And there is no shame in using either approach at all, so just do what feels right. So I wrote my master's dissertation on OBEs among South Koreans, and I found that adopting a new framework or practice can sometimes change the nature of the experience, even without you trying. So some people had recurring spontaneous OBEs which were unwanted, either due to intruders or because it would continue happening randomly throughout the day. So again, if it's happening like that, you want to do some detective work to see why you keep having spontaneous OBEs. It could be a medical disorder like epilepsy, but often it can be caused by meditation or spiritual practices or even stress. So one person told me that she believed she was haunted because of her experiences, and eventually she became a mudang, or a Korean shaman. She was surprised that after her initiation, her experiences only started to happen during rituals or during prayers or while going up in the mountains to visit a shrine instead of randomly. So they're not intrusive anymore. And she said it was like her initiation rewired her so that she was able to accept and work with these energies more. Now she sees these experiences as ways that her ancestors are getting in touch with her, and she can embrace them and work with them. So just because an experience is negative at first doesn't mean that you can transmute it. You can't transmute it into something positive in some way. So 2 other interviewees saw shadow figures in their OBEs, and they cussed them out. They kind of fought them with words. One person couldn't move. He was kind of just floating, so he decided to try to mentally direct energy to these entities and direct sort of swear words mentally to them, and both of them found that they were left alone after. The one that directed energy, he found that after practicing a new meditation technique, which kind of, he would sort of feel the oneness of the universe, and that he was using the energy of the universe as an ally to become more powerful than these beings. And after he started practicing this, his intrusive OBEs actually stopped. He hasn't had them since. So I wanted to just recommend a few books about OBEs as well, if you're interested in learning more. My absolute favorite book on OBEs ever is by Celia Green. It was written in 1968, and I think she had something like 400 plus people who filled out her survey from the BBC, radio, and the newspaper, I think, so just the general British public. And it goes into a lot of the features of the OBE, for example, like the senses that people report and things like that. There's some really, really interesting anecdotes in there too. And then Anthony Peake's book, The Out-of-Body Experience, goes into the history and science of astral travel in different traditions. And then Graham Nichols' book and Robert Peterson's book talk a lot about the techniques. So if you're interested in techniques, those are really good books to read as well. And of course, Robert Monroe's book and the other book, Astral Dynamics, are like classics as well. So thank you very much for listening. I hope that I've shared some tips that can be helpful to you. And if you want to get in touch, if you have these experiences, especially like very intrusive experiences that you're having trouble, pinpointing why it's happening to you, or you want to talk about how these tips maybe helped you or not, you can get in touch with me through my Instagram, astral_anthropology, my blog, zombiesandpjs.com, or my email, samtreasure13@outlook.com. And I talk more about my field work and interviews with Siberian and Korean shamans and alien contactees, witches, Ekankara members, and about their experiences, and also go more into the features of OBEs, such as vibrational state and the experience of being invisible in the OBE and how to navigate it, as well as why some of these techniques work, the science behind why it works. If you're interested in reading about that, my book is available for pre-order on Amazon. If you just search the title and my name, it should come up. So thank you very much, and sweet dreams.